You know that feeling when your own family treats you like you're the broken one? The one who just can't figure life out? While everyone else seems to have it all together. Well, let me tell you about Emma, a 33-year-old woman from Denver, Colorado, who spent years watching her family celebrate everyone else's achievements while treating her dreams like they were just silly hobbies. This story will touch something deep inside you because we've all felt invisible at some point. We've all been underestimated, and we've all wondered what it would feel like to finally prove everyone wrong. Emma wasn't the golden child. She never was. While her younger sister Madison was collecting scholarships and academic awards, Emma was sitting in her small apartment above her landlord's garage, building something that nobody in her family understood. It started with handmade jewelry that she sold on Etsy, then expanded to custom home decor pieces, and slowly grew into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. But to her family, especially her mother Linda and her aunt Patricia, Emma was just the daughter who dropped out of nursing school and was wasting her time with crafts. The thing about families is that they create these narratives about who you are when you're young, and sometimes they never let you grow beyond that story. Emma had been labeled as the creative but impractical one, the dreamer who couldn't stick to anything serious. When family gatherings happened, she'd watch her mother beam with pride talking about Madison's latest internship at a prestigious hospital, while Emma's growing business was referred to as her little art project. It's the kind of dismissal that cuts deep, not because it's meant to be cruel, but because it comes from people who are supposed to believe in you the most. Every holiday dinner, every birthday party, every family celebration became a reminder of how Emma didn't quite fit the mold that her family had created for success. She'd sit at the far end of the table, listening to conversations about Madison's medical school applications or her cousin Jessica's law degree, while her own achievements went unnoticed. When someone did ask about her work, it was always with that tone that suggested they were being polite rather than genuinely interested. The kind of question where you can hear the person already moving on to the next topic before you've even started answering. But Emma kept building. She kept creating. She kept pushing forward even when the voice in her head, the one that sounded suspiciously like her mother's, told her that maybe everyone was right. Maybe she should get a real job. Maybe this creative venture was just a phase that she needed to grow out of. The hardest part wasn't the long hours or the financial uncertainty in the beginning. It was the constant feeling that her own family was waiting for her to fail so they could say they told her so. The breakthrough came slowly, then all at once. What started as custom jewelry orders turned into interior design consultations. What began as home decor pieces evolved into a full lifestyle brand. Emma found herself managing a team of artisans, working with interior designers across 3 states, and fielding orders from boutique hotels and high-end restaurants. Her little art project had become a 6-figure business, but somehow the family narrative about Emma never shifted to match her reality. The graduation celebration that changed everything was for Jessica, Emma's cousin, who had just finished law school at 26. Jessica was everything that Emma's family valued, ambitious in a traditional way, following a path that made sense to everyone, and destined for the kind of career that looked impressive on paper. The party was held at Jessica's parents' house in a wealthy suburb of Denver, complete with catering, professional photographs, and enough flowers to stock a small florist shop. Emma received an invitation, of course, but she also received something else that made her stomach drop. When Emma arrived at the party, she expected to blend into the background as usual, maybe help with cleanup afterward, and listen to speeches about Jessica's bright future in corporate law. What she didn't expect was to find Aunt Patricia standing by the entrance with a clipboard and a forced smile, treating Emma like hired help rather than family. Patricia didn't even say hello. She just launched into instructions about helping with the coat check and making sure the catering station stayed organized. As if Emma didn't have her own successful business to run, her own responsibilities to manage, her own life that mattered. The assumption that Emma would automatically serve rather than celebrate stung in a way that was both familiar and fresh. This was the same family dynamic that had been playing out for years. But something about this moment crystallized all of the frustration and hurt that had been building up inside her. She found herself standing by a makeshift coat closet, hanging up strangers' jackets, while her cousin basked in congratulations just a few feet away. And the absurdity of it all finally hit her. Emma spent the first 2 hours of the party essentially working as unpaid staff, while everyone else mingled and celebrated. Nobody thought to relieve her. Nobody brought her a plate of food or asked if she wanted to sit down and join the conversation. When she finally escaped the coat situation and found a seat at one of the smaller tables in the back, the main festivities were already in full swing. There was the elaborate ice sculpture, professional lighting that made everything look like a magazine spread, and a gift table that looked like a small department store display. Jessica was radiant in a way that only comes from being the center of positive attention. She wore a white dress that seemed to catch every light in the room and moved through the crowd like she was campaigning for office. When the microphone was handed to her for the inevitable speech, she tapped it with the confidence of someone who had never doubted that people would want to hear what she had to say. The smile she wore was perfect, practiced, and just a little bit sharp around the edges. The speech started off predictably enough, thanking everyone for coming and talking about how meaningful it was to be surrounded by family. But then Jessica's tone shifted, and Emma felt the familiar clench in her stomach. That meant something uncomfortable was coming. Jessica raised her champagne glass and looked directly across the room at Emma before speaking about the importance of real education and meaningful careers, especially in a world where it was so easy to get distracted by hobbies that might seem important, but didn't really contribute to society. The words were carefully chosen, delivered with a smile that never wavered, and aimed directly at Emma's heart. The laughter that followed was the worst part, not because it was mean-spirited, but because it was so casual. Emma's uncle chuckled into his drink. Her mother gave one of those tight smiles that said she wished her daughter would just disappear for a moment. Even some family friends who barely knew Emma joined in. Because when someone makes a joke at a party, you're supposed to laugh, right? Jessica continued her speech, talking about the value of traditional success and real accomplishments, the kind that came with degrees and recognition from institutions that mattered. She talked about how some people spent years pursuing dreams that never materialized while others focused on building actual careers. Every word felt intentional, every pause calculated to land maximum impact. When she finally raised her glass in a toast to hard work and legitimate success, Emma felt something inside her shift in a way that couldn't be undone. Sitting there in her simple dress, dirt still under her fingernails from packaging orders that morning, Emma realized that she had been playing by rules that were designed to keep her small. She had been accepting crumbs of attention and apologizing for taking up space in her own family. She had been waiting for permission to be proud of what she had built. Permission that was never going to come because her success didn't fit into their narrow definition of what mattered. The realization was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it meant accepting that her family might never see her clearly, might never understand what she had accomplished, might never give her the respect and recognition she had been craving for so long. Liberating because it meant she could stop trying to earn something that was never going to be freely given. She could stop shrinking herself to make other people comfortable. She could stop pretending that their approval was more important than her own truth. Emma waited until the applause died down, and people started moving toward the dance floor where someone had set up a playlist of music that was just a little too loud for conversation. She stood up slowly, smoothed down her dress, and walked over to the main table where Jessica was posing for photos with her law school friends, still glowing from the attention and admiration of everyone around her. Emma's heart was pounding, but her voice was steady when she spoke. She congratulated Jessica on her graduation and acknowledged how hard law school must have been. But then Emma did something she had never done before at a family gathering. She told the truth about her own life. She mentioned, casually but clearly, that her little hobby business had generated over $800,000 in revenue that year, that she employed 6 people full-time, and that she had just signed a contract with a national boutique chain that would double her production capacity. She said it calmly, without anger or defensiveness, just as a statement of fact. The silence that followed was unlike anything Emma had ever experienced at a family gathering. Jessica's smile froze in place. Uncle Robert's beer bottle stopped halfway to his mouth. Emma's mother blinked several times as if she was trying to process words in a foreign language. Someone in the background actually dropped a plate, and the sound of it breaking seemed to echo longer than it should have in the sudden quiet that had fallen over the immediate area. Emma didn't wait for anyone to recover from the shock. She simply nodded politely, told Jessica again that she hoped law school would lead to everything she wanted, and walked away toward the exit. As she made her way through the crowd, she could feel the weight of stares following her. could sense the whispered conversations starting up behind her, could imagine the frantic looks being exchanged between family members who were trying to figure out what had just happened. Walking to her car felt like the longest and shortest journey of her life. Longest because she could feel the eyes of everyone at the party boring into her back, creating an almost physical pressure that made each step feel labored. Shortest because for the first time in years, maybe ever, she felt completely aligned with her own truth. She wasn't running away from confrontation. She was walking toward her authentic self, the self that had been building something beautiful and meaningful while everyone around her was looking the other way. The drive home gave Emma time to process what she had just done. Part of her felt guilty for disrupting Jessica's celebration, for creating drama at what should have been a happy family moment. But a bigger part of her felt relieved, in a way that she hadn't experienced since she was a child. She had been carrying the weight of other people's expectations and judgments for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight, to take up the space she deserved, to speak her truth without apologizing for it. By the time Emma pulled into her driveway, her phone had already started buzzing with messages. The first was from her mother, a text that managed to be both disappointed and controlling in just a few words. Something about how Emma had embarrassed the family and made Jessica's special day about herself. Then came a message from Aunt Patricia, questioning whether Emma's outburst had been necessary, and reminding her that Jessica had worked hard for her degree and deserved to celebrate without drama. Emma turned off her phone and sat in her car for a few minutes, looking at her house, her workshop space, her garden where she grew some of the materials for her designs. This was her life, the life she had built with her own hands and her own vision. It wasn't the life her family had planned for her or wanted her to have, but it was hers. It was real. It was successful. And for the first time in years, she felt proud of it without qualification or apology. That night, Emma got the best sleep she had experienced in months. There's something about finally telling the truth that settles into your bones and allows real rest. She didn't toss and turn, wondering what people thought of her or how she could make herself more acceptable to her family. She slept the deep sleep of someone who had finally stopped performing and started being authentic. The aftermath unfolded over several days, each wave bringing its own mixture of consequences and revelations. Monday morning brought a flood of emails to Emma's business account from people who had looked up her company after the party. Apparently, Jessica's law school friends were impressed by what they had discovered and wanted to discuss potential collaborations and orders. One was planning a wedding and needed custom pieces for her reception. Another was opening a boutique law practice and wanted unique decor that would set her apart from corporate firms. Emma realized that while her family had been dismissing her work as a hobby, the outside world saw it for what it really was, a legitimate business that created beautiful, valuable products and provided meaningful employment for skilled artisans. The contrast was both heartening and heartbreaking. Strangers were more willing to recognize and respect her achievements than the people who had known her since birth. Tuesday evening brought an unexpected visitor. Emma's mother, Linda, showed up at her door without calling first, carrying a casserole dish like she was making a social call, but with an expression that suggested she was there for more serious conversation. Emma let her in, noting how Linda's eyes swept over the living space, taking in the art pieces, the custom furniture, the evidence of a life well lived and thoughtfully curated. It was as if Linda was seeing Emma's space clearly for the first time. The conversation that followed was awkward in the way that family conversations often are when years of unspoken tension finally surface. Linda started with the casserole, as if food could smooth over the complicated emotions swirling between them. But then she launched into her real concern, which was that Emma had made a scene at Jessica's party, and that families were supposed to support each other, not compete for attention during important celebrations. Emma listened patiently, recognizing the familiar pattern of her mother's communication style. First came the indirect approach, then the guilt, then the attempt to reframe Emma's actions as selfish or inappropriate, rather than addressing the years of dismissiveness that had led to that moment. But this time, Emma didn't automatically apologize or try to smooth things over. Instead, she asked her mother why Jessica's feelings mattered more than hers, why Jessica's achievements deserved celebration, while Emma's were ignored or minimized. The question caught Linda off guard in a way that was visible. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it, then started again with a different approach. She talked about how Emma had always been different, how her path hadn't been traditional, how it was hard for the family to understand what she did or how to celebrate it appropriately. But even as Linda spoke, Emma could hear the defensiveness in her voice, the recognition that she couldn't quite justify the years of dismissal and neglect. When Linda mentioned that Jessica was having trouble finding a job despite her impressive degree, Emma felt a complicated mix of sympathy and vindication. Sympathy because she knew how difficult it was to face uncertainty about your future, especially when everyone expects you to have it all figured out. Vindication because it confirmed that the traditional path wasn't automatically easier or more secure than the one Emma had chosen, despite what her family had always implied. The conversation lasted over an hour, meandering through years of family dynamics, unspoken expectations, and missed opportunities for understanding. Linda never quite apologized for the years of dismissiveness, but she did admit that she hadn't understood what Emma was building or how successful it had become. She asked questions about the business that she had never asked before, showed interest in the details of Emma's work that she had previously brushed aside as unimportant. By the end of the evening, nothing was completely resolved, but something had shifted. Linda left with a business card and a promise to look at Emma's website, to try to understand what her daughter had actually accomplished. Emma felt emotionally drained, but also lighter, as if a conversation that had been building for years had finally happened, even if it hadn't gone exactly as either of them had imagined. The following weekend brought the phone call that Emma had been both expecting and dreading. Aunt Patricia's voice was carefully controlled, walking the line between family concern and barely concealed desperation. She talked around the issue for several minutes, asking about Emma's business and expressing what sounded like genuine interest, before finally getting to the real reason for the call. Patricia and her husband were having financial difficulties. Robert's hours at the manufacturing plant had been cut back, and Jessica's car payments were more expensive than they had anticipated. They had been managing fine when they thought Jessica would find a job quickly after graduation. But the legal market was more competitive than expected, and they were starting to feel the pressure. Patricia wondered, since Emma's business was doing so well, whether she might be able to help out the family during this temporary difficult period. Emma listened to the entire request without interrupting, recognizing the irony of the situation. For years, she had been treated as the family member who couldn't get her act together, the one who needed guidance and probably financial help eventually. Now, suddenly, she was being approached as the successful one, the one with resources who could solve other people's problems. The shift in perception would have been funny if it hadn't been so painful. What struck Emma most about Patricia's call was how quickly the family narrative had changed once they realized her success was real. She wasn't suddenly smarter or more capable than she had been the week before. Her business hadn't magically become legitimate overnight. The only thing that had changed was their awareness of her financial position, and apparently, that was enough to completely alter how they saw her and what they expected from her. Emma didn't say yes or no to Patricia's request. Instead, she said she would think about it and get back to her. But privately, she was already calculating the years of casual dismissals, the family gatherings where her achievements were ignored, the times she had contributed to family expenses without recognition or gratitude. She realized that her relationship with her family had always been somewhat transactional, but the transaction had been flowing in only one direction. That evening, Emma sat down with a spreadsheet and did something she had never done before. She calculated all the money she had spent on family over the years, birthday gifts that nobody else could afford, Christmas contributions to make sure everyone had a good celebration, emergency loans that were never repaid, picking up dinner checks at family gatherings because she was doing well and others were struggling. The total was larger than she had expected, over $25,000 in 5 years. Looking at that number, Emma realized that she had been financially supporting her family for years while they treated her career as a cute hobby. She had been the safety net that allowed other people to take risks and make choices without worrying about the consequences, all while being made to feel like the irresponsible one. The revelation was both enlightening and infuriating. Emma drafted a text message to Jessica first, acknowledging her apology and expressing appreciation for it, but also being honest about the years of dismissiveness that had led to that moment at the graduation party. She explained that she wasn't angry about one comment or one evening, but rather about a pattern of being undervalued and overlooked that had finally reached a breaking point. She sent similar messages to Patricia and Robert, politely declining their request for financial help and explaining that she needed to reevaluate what healthy family relationships looked like. The responses came quickly and revealed more about each family member than years of small talk at holiday dinners ever had. Linda called immediately, her voice tight with anxiety about what the neighbors would think if the family was seen as having financial problems. Patricia sent a long text about how family was supposed to stick together during difficult times and how Emma was being selfish when she had the resources to help. But the response that surprised Emma most came from Jessica herself. Instead of defensiveness or anger, Jessica sent a thoughtful message acknowledging that the family dynamics had been unfair to Emma for years. She admitted that she had been so focused on meeting everyone's expectations and being the perfect daughter and student that she hadn't really seen how dismissive everyone was of Emma's different path. She asked if they could meet for coffee and have a real conversation, not as cousins competing for family approval, but as two women trying to figure out their lives. The coffee meeting happened the following Saturday at a small place downtown that neither of them associated with family memories. Jessica arrived looking nervous and less polished than usual, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her typical professional attire. She seemed younger somehow, more vulnerable, like the cousin Emma remembered from childhood, before everyone started comparing their achievements and potential. The conversation started awkwardly, with both women acknowledging that they had never really talked honestly about their relationship or the family dynamics that had shaped it. Jessica admitted that she had been struggling with the pressure to be perfect ever since she was young, and that making jokes about Emma's different path had been a way of making herself feel better about following such a rigid plan for her life. She talked about how exhausting it was to always be the golden child, to have everyone's expectations and hopes invested in her success, to feel like she couldn't make mistakes or show uncertainty without disappointing everyone. Emma listened with growing empathy, realizing that Jessica's position in the family had its own challenges and limitations. Being the favorite came with its own kind of pressure and isolation. Jessica also revealed something that surprised Emma. She had been following Emma's business on social media for months, impressed by the creativity and success, but too proud or stubborn to acknowledge it publicly. She had always been a little envious of Emma's courage to forge her own path and create something unique, even when everyone around her was skeptical or dismissive. The comment at the graduation party had been less about dismissing Emma's work and more about Jessica's own insecurity about whether she had chosen the right path for herself. The apology that followed felt genuine, in a way that family apologies often don't. Jessica acknowledged specifically how her words had been hurtful and unfair, how the family's treatment of Emma had been wrong for years, and how she wanted to do better moving forward. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to minimize the impact of her behavior. She just owned it and expressed a sincere desire to change the dynamic between them. But then Jessica did something that Emma didn't expect. She pulled out her phone and started recording a video, explaining to her social media followers that she had made dismissive comments about non-traditional career paths and wanted to publicly acknowledge that she had been wrong. She talked about Emma's success and creativity without being prompted or asked, genuinely celebrating her cousin's achievements in a way that felt authentic rather than performative. The video was posted immediately, without editing or second-guessing, and Emma found herself genuinely moved by Jessica's willingness to be publicly vulnerable and wrong. It wasn't just an apology, it was a recognition that the family's values and priorities had been skewed, and that Emma deserved better treatment and recognition than she had received. They talked for 2 more hours after that, not about family drama or business success, but about their dreams and fears and uncertainties. Emma learned that Jessica was considering leaving law to pursue something in social justice advocacy, a path that would be less financially secure, but more personally meaningful. Jessica learned about Emma's plans to expand internationally and her hopes of creating an apprenticeship program for young artisans. For the first time in years, they connected as individuals rather than as family members playing predetermined roles. Emma realized that she had been missing out on a genuine relationship with Jessica because they had both been so focused on meeting different family expectations. They made plans to stay in better touch and to support each other's actual goals rather than the versions of themselves that the family wanted them to be. The video that Jessica posted sparked conversations throughout their extended family and friend network. Comments poured in from people expressing appreciation for her honesty and sharing their own experiences with family pressure and non traditional career paths. Several of Jessica's law school friends reached out to Emma directly, interested in learning more about her business and potentially collaborating on projects. Emma's mother called that evening, having seen the video through Patricia's Facebook account. Linda's voice was different than Emma had heard it in years, softer and more uncertain. She asked questions about the business that she had never shown interest in before, wanted to understand what Emma actually did day to day, expressed regret for not paying better attention to her daughter's accomplishments over the years. The conversation was still awkward in places, with Linda struggling to find words for concepts and emotions that she wasn't used to expressing. But there was something genuine in her effort to understand and connect that felt new. Emma found herself sharing details about her work that she had given up trying to explain years ago, and Linda listened without interrupting or trying to redirect the conversation to more familiar topics. By the end of the call, Linda had asked if she could visit Emma's workshop sometime, maybe understand better what her daughter had built. Emma agreed, cautiously optimistic that their relationship might be able to evolve beyond the patterns that had defined it for so long. She didn't expect transformation overnight, but she appreciated the effort and the recognition that change was needed. The next family gathering was Robert's 4th of July barbecue, an annual tradition that Emma had often dreaded for all the usual reasons, but this time felt different from the moment she arrived. Instead of being handed a task list or relegated to helping in the kitchen, Emma was greeted by Jessica with a plate of food and an invitation to sit at the main table where the conversation was happening. The shift in family dynamics was subtle, but unmistakable. When Uncle Robert asked what Emma had been up to lately, Jessica was the first to answer, talking enthusiastically about Emma's business expansion and recent contract wins. The questions that followed were genuine rather than polite, and Emma found herself actually enjoying explaining her work to relatives who were finally listening with real interest. Patricia apologized privately for the pressure she had put on Emma regarding financial help, acknowledging that it hadn't been fair to dismiss her work for years, and then suddenly expect her to solve family problems. Robert expressed interest in potentially doing some carpentry work for Emma's workshop expansion, offering his skills rather than asking for her money. Even some of the extended family members who had laughed at Jessica's graduation speech made efforts to understand and acknowledge Emma's achievements. The evening felt like a new beginning rather than just another obligation to endure. Emma realized that standing up for herself at Jessica's graduation hadn't just been about that one moment of public humiliation. It had been about changing the entire dynamic of how she related to her family. By refusing to accept dismissive treatment and by asserting her own worth and achievements, she had forced everyone to reevaluate their assumptions and behaviors. Not everything was perfect or completely resolved. Some family members still seemed more comfortable with the old dynamic where Emma was the struggling creative and Jessica was the responsible achiever. Linda still sometimes slipped into old patterns of worry about Emma's non-traditional path, though she caught herself more often and asked questions instead of making assumptions. Patricia and Robert were warmer, but still seemed slightly uncomfortable with the reversal of who was financially successful in the family. But the fundamental shift was real and lasting. Emma no longer felt like she had to apologize for her success or minimize her achievements to make other people comfortable. She had learned the difference between family harmony based on her acceptance of a diminished role and genuine family connection based on mutual respect and recognition. She chose the latter, even when it was messier and more complicated. Jessica thrived after leaving law to pursue advocacy work, finding fulfillment in a career that aligned with her actual values rather than her family's expectations. She and Emma developed a genuine friendship, supporting each other through the challenges of building non-traditional careers and dealing with family pressure. They even collaborated on a project creating custom awards for a women's advocacy organization that Jessica joined. Emma's business continued to grow, not because she was trying to prove anything to her family anymore, but because she had finally stopped spending emotional energy on seeking their approval and could focus entirely on her own vision and goals. The freedom that came from accepting her family's limitations and choosing her own worth was transformative in ways she hadn't expected. The most profound change was internal. Emma realized that she had been carrying the weight of her family's expectations and judgments for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to move through the world without that burden. Christine started making decisions based on what she actually wanted, rather than what might finally earn her recognition. She invested in her business, her relationships, and her personal growth without constantly calculating how others would perceive her choices. Looking back, Emma understood that the graduation party confrontation had been inevitable. Years of accumulated dismissiveness and disrespect had built up to a point where something had to give. She was proud that when the moment came, she had chosen truth over peacekeeping, authenticity over family harmony, self-respect over the approval she had been chasing for years. The story didn't end with everyone becoming best friends or with all family problems magically disappearing. Real life is messier and more complicated than that. But it did end with Emma finally taking up the space she deserved, speaking her truth without apology, and building the life she wanted, regardless of whether her family understood or approved of her choices. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to play the role they've assigned you, especially when that role requires you to stay small so others can feel big. Emma learned that family doesn't mean accepting mistreatment or dismissiveness in the name of keeping peace. Real family means being seen and valued for who you actually are, not who others need you to be. The greatest victory wasn't proving her financial success or embarrassing the people who had dismissed her. The greatest victory was finally believing in her own worth enough to demand that others recognize it too. Emma discovered that she didn't need her family's permission to be proud of what she had built. But she also didn't have to build walls around her heart to protect herself from their limitations. She learned to love her family while also protecting her own well-being, to maintain relationships without sacrificing her authentic self, to be generous without being a doormat. Most importantly, she learned that her worth wasn't determined by other people's ability to recognize it, including people who had known her since birth. Her value existed independently of their acknowledgement, and that realization changed everything about how she moved through the world. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or dismissed for choosing a different path, know that your worth isn't up for debate. Your achievements don't need anyone else's validation to be real. Your dreams don't need anyone else's permission to matter. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth about your life and let others decide how they want to respond. You deserve to take up space, to be proud of what you've built, and to be celebrated for who you actually are, not who others think you should be.